Hello everyone, welcome to AWS Tutorials. In AWS Tutorials, you learn about AWS services. Today I'm going to talk about row level and column level security in AWS Lake Formation. Now, column level security feature was available for quite some time. Row level security was declared quite some time back, but it has been made generally available from the during the reInvent couple of weeks back. So let's try to understand how row level and column level security works in AWS Lake Formation. Let's try to see what problem we are trying to solve. Suppose you have a data platform where you have got a customers table like that, and for this customers table, different types of user, different groups of user, different roles of user might have different types of access on the data. So for instance, you might have a super user who will say, I would like to have full access on a table. I can see all the rows and all the columns. But there could be some people working for EMEA sales only, and they say that, well, I can see only those rows of the table where the territory is equal to EMEA. So I can see only those rows where territory is equal to EMEA, and I am interested in just 4 columns: ID, customer, territory, and total sales. Similarly, there could be people who are looking into USA sales, and those guys can see only those rows where territory is equal to USA, and they can also see only 4 columns: ID, customer, territory, and total sales. Now there could be people who are working for marketing team who will say, I want to have full access, but I want just access on the 4 columns: ID, customers, territory, and email. They don't want to see total sales. So you can see there could be different persona of people who might want to have different level of access on the same table, both row wise and column wise, depending on what kind of function they do and what kind of how they want to use this data in your data platform for their day-to-day business purposes. So basically what you see here is that there is a requirement that you want to have column level security. That means you want to restrict access of the people, of the roles, or of the users, of the group on certain columns only. And similarly, you also want to apply a row level security where certain rows can be restricted to only certain people or group or users only. And both of these row level and column level security can be combined together if possible. Now, when you combine this row level and column level security, it's called actually cell level security, because you are not only restricting on columns or not only restricting on rows, but you are restricting on the combination of rows and columns. So basically you can control which cell in the table people can have access to. So you can define this kind of cell level security, which is nothing but a combination of a row level and column level security, and then you can apply this to individual users or group of users or to different roles. So this is what you need to achieve. So how do we do that? So we achieve this kind of row level or column level security, or in combination cell level security, using lake formation security and data filters. So you have to leverage data using lake formation security. Now you know that once you define your data platform, you can actually provide access to your data in 2 methods. One is you can use classical IAM level security, where your policies of the policies defined in IAM define which data the person can have access to. The second way which people can define security is by defining security inside a lake formation itself. So If you want to apply row level and column level security, then you have to use lake formation security. With IAM level, it is not possible. It is possible only with lake formation level security. And then you create something called data filters. So in data filters, you can define your cell level security, cell level filtering, and then this cell level filtering you can apply on different users or groups or roles to control their access to what rows or columns in the table the person can see. So the way it works is that in the lake formation you have used AWS glue catalog method to catalog your data as a table. Then on that table you define your data filters. So data filters are nothing but your row level or column level filtering, and I will show you. In fact, I have a demo towards the end to show the entire flow, so you will understand how exactly you can apply data level filter. And then using these filters, then you can grant access to the table for different users and groups or role depending on which principal want to access data. So it's a pretty straightforward process. First, you need to have your data cataloged using glue catalog, and then you simply create data filters in lake formation to define your row and column level security, and finally you use AWS lake formations based security to grant access to this table using these data filters for different user groups and roles as the requirement demands. Okay. So let's try to understand how does this data filter look like. So basically data filter looks pretty straightforward. What you have here, you have to provide your data filter name. Then you provide your database name, the database where your data has been cataloged. Then your catalog table name. Then first set of information you provide is what column the person can have access to. By default, it is access to all columns, but then you can also choose include column or exclude column options to decide which small set of columns the person will have access to. And then simply you go and define your row filter expression, and by defining your row filter expression, actually you can define which rows this data filter how row wise data will be filtered for this data filter. So when you write a SQL kind of query, you put a where clause in, and where clause you provide your filtering mechanism, like when age is more than 25 or when territory is equal to US, those kind of things. Similarly here in row level filter also you put those where clause kind of syntaxes to decide this data filter will filter on which rows. And again, when I show you demo, then it will start making more sense to you. So basically you define both your column level and row level security, and that way you can define your data filter. And there could be a scenario when there are more than one data filter applied. So for instance, let's take example. So suppose this is a table, okay? Same table I showed you earlier. And suppose you defined a data filter. That data filter says that I can look into only customers or email column, but where territory is equal to USA. That's the filter I defined. So look into, there are two columns here. I can see customer and email, and only those rows where territory is equal to US. Now suppose there is another filter which says, well, I can see all the columns, but so there's no filter on the column. I can see all the columns, but my territory is EMEA only. So all the columns, but only EMEA territory. Now suppose these two filters has given access to a user. Now what kind of data this user will see? Here I am filtering on USA rows, but only two columns. Here I am filtering on all columns. So there's no filter on the column, but I'm filtering on territory equal to EMEA. So it it can happen in your use case that one user might have more than one data filter used to grant access. And in that case, how the behavior works? Well, the behavior works using a union behavior, I will say. So union of these two filters is what the user will have access to. For instance, in this particular example, this user, if you look at the column here, I have all columns. Here I have got customers and email. So if you union both, basically it comes out like all columns, because all columns already have customers and email. So column wise, my access will be all column. And then similarly, row wise union behavior also comes. So here it says row is filtered to USA. Here the row is filtered to EMEA. This will have a row as a EMEA or USA. So you can see here that if more than one filter is used to grant access to a user, you will see this kind of union behavior where the output of these two filters will be combined together to give the results for the user. So it is very important to understand here, because we know then that like in general security context, if more than one security policies are assigned to the user, generally the more restrictive policy prevails. Here it is not that kind of case. In case of filtering, if more than one filters are used to give access to the user or the group or the role, any principal, then in that case the union behavior prevails, not the restrictive behavior. And that's why it is very important to understand here. One more thing which is very important, and in fact I struggled a lot on this point here because it's not very well documented. If you create like row level or column level filtering, or if you use data filter and then you try to query your data using Athena, if you use like out of box work group, it's not going to work for you. You have to create a special work group with the name Amazon Athena Lake Formation using the latest Athena engine, which is 2.0. So you need to create a work group like this and use that work group to access your data. Then only you can see the effect of row level and column level security. Otherwise, it does not work. So I struggled a lot on this particular part because it's not very well documented. And when I was studying about govern table, then I come across this particular thing, and then I tested with this particular combination, and then everything started working. So yeah, it's very important especially if you're trying to use Amazon Athena to verify if my data filters are working or not, you need to create an Amazon Athena Lake Formation work group in order to see the effect. So the concept is pretty straightforward and simple. Now it's time to see a demo. So demo is pretty straightforward. We will have a customers table, a dummy customers table. And then in that customers table, I will have 3 users. One user will be a super user, which will have access to all rows and all columns. Then I will have something called NA users, North America users, you can say, NA user. In fact, not any users, NA user. And that user will can see only customer ID, customer name, and territory, but where territory is equal to North America. Then we have EMEA user, and EMEA user has got again same customer ID, customer name, and territory, but where the territory is equal to EMEA. So row level filtering is on the EMEA. So this is what I'm going to demonstrate you in the demo to see how you can define filters to control these 3 different types of accesses. Okay, so let's get to the AWS console. So in order to show the demo, guys, what I have done over here is that I in a bucket dojo lake, I have created a customers folder. And in that customers folder, I have put down a customers.csv file. And this customer.csv file, if I try to query the data here, let's see how the data look like. It's a CSV file which shows me customer records. So if I run the query, this is how my data look like. You can see I have got customer ID, customer name, email, city, country, territory, customer first name and last name. And you can see that I want to use territory whose value is actually North America, EMEA, or North America, like that. I want to use this particular column to define my row level filter, and I want to define my column level filter on customer ID, customer name, and territory. So this is the CSV file I have got into my S3 bucket. Now what I have done here is that in a lake formation, this is the lake formation console, I have created a database called DojoDB. Now one thing is very important is I am trying to use lake formation security. That means I'm not using IAM based security. So when you create a database, actually it gives you an option whether you want to use IAM to access control or you don't want to use IAM. So if you keep this tick on, this checkbox on, then that means you want to use IAM for the IAM based policy for the access control. But in our case, in order to leverage a row or column level security, you have to use lake formation security. So you have to tick this off. So make sure that you have ticked this off when you create your database. Now I can verify it here if I click on this DojoDB database and try to see the details. You can see here this checkbox has been ticked off. That means it is not using IAM based access control, but it is using lake formation security. Okay, fair enough. What else I did? So then I created a glue crawler. So let me go back to the crawlers. So I created a glue crawler, and in this glue crawler, what I'm doing here is that actually I am looking into S3 Dojo Lake customers folder to simply catalog my table. So I'm simply cataloging the table, and for cataloging the table, I'm using this glue role called Dojo Glue Role. Now, my crawler will not work if this Dojo Glue role has not been given security using lake formation security. So let's go and see that what kind of permission this Dojo Glue role has here. So if I go to my lake formation console, and if I go on the left hand side data lake permissions, you can see over here is that my Dojo Glue role has got access on the database, my DojoDB database, and it has got all permissions. So it has got all permission. That means it can create, drop, describe, alter. It can do any kind of operation on the database. So I have simply used this particular role with my crawler to catalog my table, customers table, which is stored into the S3 bucket. Now here is how my table look like. And if I open the customers table, actually you can see here it shows the same schema I showed you in the S3 bucket. It has got all the columns properly cataloged, and this is the table I'm going to use. Now okay, so fair enough. Now what else we need to do? So this is what groundwork I have already done for you. And if we go to look at the data lake filtering, actually on the tables, only this role has got permission because I gave permission for one of the testing purposes. Otherwise, you look at this customers table, no one has got permissions. Not a single user has got permission on this customers table. Okay. Now, I have created three roles over here, three users over here, which I'm going to use for the testing. The first user is my login name. So this is a super user, and you can see here I have logged in with that user over here. If you see on the top right corner. Then I have got EMEA user, which I will use for EMEA based data filter, and and NA user, and this user I will give access to North America based filter. And then I have got Athena also open, and if I try, and in Athena I have created this work group. So there is already a work group called primary, but then I have created another work group, Amazon Athena Lake Formation, because as I told you earlier that if you want to use Athena to access your table using data filters, then yeah, you need to create a separate work group, otherwise it does not work. Now, if you want to, generally you will find that you will have only primary work group, not the other work group. So you simply need to actually on the left hand side, click on this menu options, go to the work group and simply say I want to create the work group and provide the same work group name I gave you here. And then simply provide where the result will be stored. So Athena uses an S3 bucket for storing the result. So you simply provide an S3 bucket where you can store the result. Then you can keep this engine selection to automatic. And then, yeah, you can keep rest of things as it is and simply create the work group, and that way you can create the work group. But in my case, I have already created the work group, and this is I have selected for my query purposes. Now, if you look at the my catalogs, I've got my DojoDB and customers. But if I try to run my query, I will not get any result here because this table has got no permissions, as I showed you earlier in the data lake permissions. So now this is the ground which is set up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start granting access to different users. So Bridgen S, I will give this particular here, I will give access to all the rows and all the columns. EMEA users and NA user, I will give access to only EMEA rows and NA rows and unrestricted columns only using data filter. So let's go back to lake formation security. And I will also show the union behavior. So let's first create a data filter. And okay, let me do one thing. Let me first delete this one. I think I use this for demo purposes, like testing purposes. Okay, so if I remove it, oops, why it is not removing? Okay, let's leave it. Okay, looks like you're not authorized to access requested permission. Anyway, not a worry at all. Okay, so let's do this way. So first I will create first filter, and I will call it say EMEA data filter. And so EMEA data filter, I'm creating a data filter where I can use to control access to the EMEA based rows only. And my database name is DojoDB. My table is customers. What column level I want to give access? So I want to give access to limited column only. So I want say include columns, and only columns I want to include is customer ID, customer name, and territory. So it looks good. And then I can simply provide my row level filter, and my row level filter is territory is equal to NA. Oops, no, NA, it's EMEA, right? So I will say territory is equal to EMEA. There we go. Okay. So I'll just copy it because I'm going to use it one more time. So it's pretty straightforward configuration. I provided a filter name, then my database name, then table name. Here I provide my column level restriction, and then I provide a row level filter, territory equal to EMEA. I create the filter. So when I create the filter, it's very important to go and see how the data lake permissions look like. So if I look at data lake permissions, now you will see here that once you create a filter, automatically you are given access on that filter. Yeah, so that filter automatically grants you access. So if you look at the Bridgen DS, I already have got on this customers table access using this data cell filter, EMEA data filter. That means if I go to Athena and query now, I should see data based on this particular filter. So if I go to Athena and run this query again, select star from DojoDB customers, I should see filtering. Okay, hopefully. I should see, yeah, you can see here, I can see only EMEA data and customer ID, customer name. So you can see here, the moment I created the filter, since I created the filter, I'm the owner of the filter, automatically I have been given access to this particular filter, and I can see my territory. I can see my data filter getting applied on my access rights, so I can verify that in the Athena. Now let's create another data filter. So I go to my data filter, and this time I'm going to create a filter called NA data filter. And this time again it's a Dojo DB. I want to create filter on customers. Include columns. Let's include the same 3 columns: customer ID, customer name, and territory. And then in the filter, I will simply say this is my NA. So where territory is equal to NA, right? So simple where clause, and I create this filter. Now I have created this NA data filter as well. And then if I go to my data lake permissions, you can see over here that I have got now this super user has got both access, EMEA data filter and NA data filter. So now I should see an output which is union of result of this and result of this, these 2 filters. So I go to Athena, and if I run this query one more time, and I can see union behavior. Yeah, come on, show me the result. Yeah, here we go. So I can see the 3 columns, still 3 columns, but I can see NA and EMEA both, because as I told you, when more than one filter you have access through, then it shows the union behavior. But my purpose was to actually go ahead and give access to the whole table. So what I can do here, that I can actually, if you want, I can remove these 2 things over here, but I don't want to, because then I will not be owner anymore. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give a generic table level access to this user, and by virtue of that, I will be able to see the full table. So simply I click on the grant over here, and I can say I want to give access to BRAJNDS user. Let's go for named resource, and for Dojo DB, for customers table, I simply want to give access to select and on all the data. So, and that's it. So now if you look at that, to my user account, I have now created a direct access. So there's no data filter this time. It's a column level access to the whole table itself. Now if I go and run my query again here, I should see the full table, because again it's a union behavior. So now I have got now I have got 3 permissions here. So these 2 are like filtering, but this one is giving me all the access. So ideally I should have all the access, and voila, you can see over here now I can see all the rows and all the columns in the table. So you can see just showed you how the union behavior works. Now let me do one thing. I have 2 more users, NA users and EMEA users, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to now grant access to these 2 users and see if these guys will have access based on the data filter or not. So I go to lake formation, and I simply click on grant. So I can stay in data lake permissions and say I want to grant access. And this time I want to grant access to EMEA user. EMEA user, go to my named data catalog. And then I go to my Dojo DB and my customers table. And this is an EMEA user. So the filter I want to apply on this is EMEA data filters. Simple. So I can select more than one data filter also. In that case also it will be a union behavior. But in my demo I want to give EMEA user access based on EMEA data filter and NA user access based on NA data filter. So I simply selected EMEA data filter. EMEA data filter. And then I simply give select permission, nothing more than that. And Here we go. The moment you give access to data filter, automatically the user gets access to the customer's table. So you don't need to give any separate access to the customer's table. So pretty straightforward, guys. You first select your principal, users or roles which you want to give access to, or groups also. Then you simply select your database name, your table name, your filter you want to give access through, and then simply finally select permission over here, and I grant it. And similarly, I do the same for the NA user. So I click on the grant access and say I want to give access to NA user. And for NA user, same way, I want to give name data catalog, and then DojoDB, and then my customers table, and then my NA data filter, and then select, and then I simply grant. Now, if I look at my access now, if I refresh this, yeah, so you can see here as a brilliant as I have access to both these two filters, and in fact I'm the owner, so you can see I have all the permissions. I can grant, I have permission, I can grant permission. So on those two filters I have got full permission. But if I look at these two particular users, EMEA user and NA user, these two are IAM users. They also have got access to EMEA data filter and NA data filter, but they have only select permissions. That means this filter is used to control what data they can see. They don't own it. I mean, of course, you can give ownership as well if you want them to maintain it or give further access to other users. But the difference is that since I created the filter, I am the owner of these filters, and by virtue of that I can select data as well. But here the EMEA and NA users have got on these two data filters on this table only select permission. So now if I log off and log in back again using NA user and EMEA user and try to access data in Athena, I should be able to see only the rows and columns which these filters have restricted my access to. So let me do that. So let me close all the console windows over here and log in back. So I'm going to log in back as a NA user first, and I'll show you the query. So let me log in back as a NA user. So I have logged in back as a NA user. You can see here I'm a NA user now, and if I go to Athena now, and I try to query my data. So if I go to Athena now, I have make sure my work group is still selected to Amazon Athena Lake Formation. And then I simply say select star from DojoDB customers. If I run this query, I should see data based on NA data filter applied on my user account. So you can see here, I can see only NA data and only 3 columns. Now let me log in again as an EMEA user and show you how does the query outcome look for the EMEA user. Okay, so I have logged in as an EMEA user, and you can see on the right hand side on the top I am an EMEA user now. Now if I try to go to Athena and make sure my work group is still Amazon Athena Lake Formation, select star from DojoDB customers. If I run this query, I should see the outcome based on my data filter, and you can see here I can see only 3 columns and only my EMEA rows, nothing more than that. So you can see how this data filters can be used to restrict access to the users or groups or roles on certain rows and columns within the data in your data platform. So that was all for today's video, guys. Hope you like the video, and if you like, please click on the like button. Please subscribe to my channel. I always look forward to your feedback and comments for the improvement, whether it is for the new content or if you want to correct some of the mistakes I have made, or more important, if you want to discuss any of the design things. So any of the videos, any of the concept, any of the problem you want to discuss, please feel free to share your comments, your problems with me in the comment section of my YouTube channel. I will be more than happy to discuss with you and try to solve your problem. I try my best to give you response soonest possible. So I look forward to your feedback and comments for improvement, for the changes, for the new content. I promise to come back again in a week's time with another such video. In the meantime, please stay safe and have a nice day. Bye-bye.